happy October. I hope it is going very well for you so far. So throughout the year, I read horror books because that's my life. I love horror and spooky and just everything that goes along with it. And so if you feel like your October could use a little more spook and a little more like creepy vibe, I thought I would recommend to you some spooky reads to enhance your October just a little more. So I have some iced pumpkin spice coffee here in my amazing cup that my good friend Dalton sent me. So yeah, grab yourself a coffee or a tea and let's discuss some spooky reads that you can settle in with on a hopefully spooky, overcast, chilly day and just sink into a nice book and just really get in the vibe. Hopefully. I mean, our October so far has still been like high 70s and 80s. So really just hoping that that chilly weather comes real soon. That's really good. This is homemade. It's like coffee, sugar-free creamer, and protein powder because you gotta get those gains. Alright, so let's talk about my favorite horror books that I read this year. I read lots of horror books this year, but not all of them made the list because I don't want to waste your time. I'll be real honest. I'm not going to waste your time because I'm sad I wasted my time on a few books this year because they were free. And they were free for a reason. So, let's get into it. Alright, let's start with Remember Me by Chelsea Babutsky. Such a funny name. Remember Me by Chelsea Babutsky. So I feel like this is a good one if you're more of a kind of a romance person. If you like romance novels, which I do not. But this had like a good romantic storyline, but also like really good creep. Like really good creep in a couple of parts, but also like kind of time travel, and like it was honestly not what I was expecting. Really solid storytelling. Like I was genuinely surprised by this book. Just a really brief overview. A girl goes to stay at a hotel for the summer with her dad, who's like the new manager. So they're kind of like living there while he oversees it. And like stuff starts happening, like mysterious stuff. I don't want to give away too much because the storyline is so kind of intricate and like unexpected. So yeah, it's like ghost stuff. But there's also way more to it. And yeah, this was a free one on Audible that I found. And it was so unexpected because quite a few of the free ones I have found on Audible. Wow. Yeah. I highly recommend this. It's very good. Let's next talk about 20th Century Ghosts by Joe Hill. This is a collection of short stories by Joe Hill, who I love, Stephen King's son, and you can definitely tell, not only by his quality of writing, but the fact that he intersperses, like, Stephen King stuff in his books sometimes. But 20th Century Ghosts is a collection of short stories, horror short stories by Joe Hill, and it is such a good book. It's kind of hard to give you a synopsis of a short story book because it's full of all these different stories. But one specifically that stood out to me was one that takes place in like a theater. Yeah, it's super spooky. It has to do with like a theater ghost, which has always fascinated me ever since my oldest brother told me like a story he had experience he had working in a theater where he saw like a ghost of a girl that looked like she was from the 80s maybe, when he was cleaning up one time after a movie. And so, like, I think he told me that when I was pretty young. So, like, ever since he told me that, I don't know, I've just been fascinated by, like, theater ghosts and, like, haunted theaters. And so that story really resonated with me. But the whole book is very good. I highly recommend it if, you know, full novels aren't your thing. If you're more into, like, horror podcasts and stuff like that, a book of short stories would be right up your alley. So I highly recommend 20th Century Ghosts by Joe Hill. Let's next talk about Midnight Mass by F. Paul Wilson. So obviously 2 years ago, the amazing Mike Flanagan gave us a show called Midnight Mass. And I just happened to stumble across on Audible a book called Midnight Mass. And I was like, well, this can't be, it's not by Mike Flanagan, so this cannot be. And then I looked at the book description and it was like, vampires. And I'm like, wait, what? So I have no clue how no one has, like, there hasn't been any kind of legal, I don't know, because it's vampires in a church and it has the same name. So I don't know how there's, like, no, because I looked and I could not find anything about a lawsuit or any kind of legal trouble between Mike Flanagan and F. Paul Wilson. So I don't know if just maybe it just hasn't been noticed. I don't know how that's possible. But I then binged Midnight Mass when I had COVID. And that led me down a whole rabbit hole of binging everything Mike Flanagan has ever made for Netflix. Anyway, Midnight Mass, the novel by F. Paul Wilson, highly recommend. Oh my god, it is not Mike Flanagan Midnight Mass, but it is so good. And it needs to be made into a movie or a show. It was really good. And like like what happens with the like turn of like the battle between humans and vampires. I wasn't expecting it, and it was really good. It was definitely creepy at points, and that was when I was like, well, dang, I wish Mike Flanagan had gotten a hold of this, because it definitely had really creepy parts that I think he could have handled really well. But yeah, so I mean, whether you like Mike Flanagan's Midnight Mass or not, if you like vampires, read Midnight Mass by F. Paul Wilson, because it is so good. Highly recommend. Alright, next let's talk about The Amulet by returning author Michael McDowell. This book. So The Amulet centers around, you guessed it, a necklace that just causes death and destruction for whoever holds it. And it is such a good story. And the ending, like, okay, so the ending would be, like, shocking enough as it is. But for me personally, I was listening to it on Audible, and I looked at my, how much do you have left to read? And I don't know what happened. I don't know how I looked at this wrong. But I looked at it and I thought it said, oh, you have like 20 minutes left. I think maybe I superimposed a zero in there. I don't know. So I'm like, okay, like this has 20 minutes left. This is getting intense. Okay. And then it just ended. And because it had 2 minutes left. And so like the ending was already shocking as it was, and then with the way it ended and the fact that I thought I had 20 minutes left, the ending was just like a kick in the stomach. Like I was not, yeah. It was a great experience. But yeah, I highly recommend, because I know last year we talked about his book, The Elementals, and I liked that book. It was good. But I liked this book so much better. I think it's definitely my favorite Michael McDowell book so far. I want to read more of his stuff. But yes, this book was so good. It just kept you so like, what's going to happen next? Like, how is this amulet going to keep getting passed on to people when it's causing so much destruction? It was so good. So yeah, I highly recommend that book. I highly recommend every book on this list, just so you know. I know you're going to get tired of hearing it, but I do. Okay, so we have 3 books left to talk about. So we have another returning author, Clay McLeod Chapman. Last year we talked, I think it was last year, we talked about Whisper Down the Lane, which I liked. It wasn't my favorite book I read last year, my favorite horror book. But this year, not that long ago, I read his book called The Remaking. My goodness. So The Remaking centers around, so there's a legend about this girl and her mom that got accused of being a witch, and so they were murdered by their village in like the 1800s. It's not really clear about when this takes place, but I think it's like the 1800s. So you flash forward to like the 80s, okay? And there's this child star in a movie being made about this, and just bad things happen, okay? Bad things happen. She gets like shot to like 80s movie final girl stardom because of all the like lore and the bad things that happened around this movie on the set, and like, yeah, but like bad things really happen, like supernatural bad things. She's like, yeah, I'm making a living off this stardom, but like, it was awful, you know, okay? And then, so like 30 years later, they decide to remake that movie, like on the old set and all this stuff, and they want her involved in the remaking. And I can't even explain to you why, if it was his writing or the characters or the plot. I don't know. But every time I had to shut the book off, I was sad. And I was just so excited to get back to the book. And it was so good. I don't know. It was just, everything about the book felt very real and genuine. And I don't know. I just really, really enjoyed this book. It was so good. And to show you that I don't pick an author and be like, I just love everything they do. He literally just released a book last month, I think. Clay McLeod Chapman, that is. And I read it, and I did not include it on this list because it was only okay. There's a lot of like body horror, and like, I don't know, it's kind of weird. And even though I'm singing his praises right now for the remaking, his newest book, I didn't really care for. So, yeah. Our second to last book. Oh my god, we have more books than I thought. We still have 3 more books. Oops. It's a longer list this year. So, next I'm going to talk about Woman in Black by Susan Hill. So I think she's also a returning author from my channel, because I think one year I talked about her book Dolly, which I was not a big fan of, if I remember right. But Woman in Black. Oh my god. Okay, so I listened to it on Audible. No, there's only one book on here I read physically. That'll be the last book we talk about. But Woman in Black I listened to on Audible, and it was like a whole production thing. Like, it was one author, but it had like sound effects and stuff. The author was, or the narrator was amazing. He was so good. But the story itself, the book, oh my god, it was so good. It was so scary. Like, genuinely freaked me out at times. The movie sticks pretty close. I want to rewatch the movie now that I've read the book. Obviously, I love the movie. Daniel Radcliffe and, like, a couple other Potter people. But yeah, the big thing is the ending. The ending is completely different. I will spoil that for you. The ending of the movie and the ending of the book are complete opposites. But the book is so good, and I highly recommend reading it. It's very good. I don't know how reading it physically would be, so I definitely recommend the audiobook. And like I said, the narrator is phenomenal. I love him. He needs to do more audiobooks. Alright, second to last, let's talk about like my new favorite author that I've discovered in the last year, like literally this year. Paul Tremblay. I have read everything Paul Tremblay has written since we saw Knock at the Cabin, which was, I don't even remember when that movie came out this year. But it came out this year. But since the movie came out, I have read everything Paul Tremblay has written. My God, he is phenomenal as an author. So I would like to spotlight my favorite book of his, Head Full of Ghosts. So Head Full of Ghosts follows two sisters, mainly the younger sister, as she is dealing with, and it jumps from the present to the past a bit, but it deals with her going through her sister, her older sister being possessed by a demon. The mental games that Paul Tremblay plays with your head, it's masterful. I mean, this book, you don't know what's happening the entire book, okay? But in, like, the best way possible, okay? And it gets to the end, and it's horrible in the best way possible. And I don't know if you've ever seen, this is the best way I can contribute it or, like, relate it to, but there's a Denzel Washington movie called Fallen, and the end of that really reminds me of the end of Head Full of Ghosts. Like, you get to the end of the book, and it's such a, the end is such a, like, gut punch. Like, you don't know how to feel at the end of the book. Like, it just, you have to take a breath. Because you think you know what's happening. By the end of the book, you're like, oh, okay, like, I finally get it. I finally understand what's happening. Holy crap, what a roller coaster, okay? And then, like, the last two sentences happen, and you're like, what? Like, it just, yeah, he's just, Knock at the Cabin, or Cabin at the End of the World, which is what the book is actually called, is a good book. It is. It's a very good book. I would literally recommend you read anything he has ever written. He has another book coming out, I think, next month. And I'm so excited. But yes, anything Paul Tremblay has ever written, please do yourself a favor and read it. Let's talk about our last book. Our last book is by the author who appears on this list twice, Joe Hill. And that book is HeartShaped Box by Joe Hill. This is the only book on this list I read physically. And when I tell you, reading this book was genuinely the most freaked out I have been reading a book in a long time. Like, there were times when I didn't want to keep looking down the page at the words printed there, because I was so freaked out at what was going to be described to me next. I've never had that happen in a book before that I can remember. The closest I can remember that happening was when I read The Shining by Stephen King. That book freaked me out very bad. And I was not expecting it because I had seen The Shining so many times. The good version from 97, not Stanley Kubrick's garbage. HeartShaped Box. It's not, I don't think it's going to be everyone's cup of tea, and it might not scare everyone like it did me, but my goodness, it terrified me. Just the way he described. So HeartShaped Box, I guess I should explain. The main guy is kind of like, I wouldn't say washed up, but he was in a band a long time ago, and he's like famous for being in that band, and he had a lot of, like, you know, women along the way, and he wronged one, and he gets sent this heart-shaped box in the mail with a suit in it, and as soon as he opens it, there's, like, I think by like that night, there is a ghost in his house, and the ghost is where my problems lie, because the way Joe Hill describes this ghost and the way the ghost acts and everything is what terrified me so thoroughly. Yeah, I don't know, like, this book might not be everyone's cup of tea, and it might not scare people like it did me, but it really, really did me in. I was not expecting that. So yeah, I loved that book so much. If Mike Flanagan ever gets a hold of that book, God help me, I won't make it. I won't make it through it. I won't make it. Alright, you guys, there are my recommendations for spooky reads for this October. I think it's a pretty large scale of, like, really, really scary to, like, really not that scary at all. Yeah, most of these were not that scary. They're just the horror aspects of them were really good. They were really well written, or really, really, like, enthralling or entertaining. So yeah, I really hope you guys check out at least some of these books. Yeah, if you have not checked out Paul Tremblay, really any of these authors, just do yourself a favor and add them to your library, because oh my god, they're amazing. But yeah, let me know what you guys think down below. Hit me up with some of your recommendations for horror reads. I mean, October's not over. I still need things to read, so let me know. Yeah, and let me know if you guys read any of these, because I would love to know what your guys' thoughts are on some of these books. So, yeah. Alright, I love you guys so much, and I will see you later.